Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tractorman 44. For all of you out there that are blessed with the good fortune of having nice new tractors and everything, sometimes you don't see what kind of stuff that us guys with these old ratty old tractors, deal with. And I tell the boys all the time, if you're not willing to tinker and play and work on these things, don't even mess with them. Just go ahead and buy you something that's much more reliable, a little more expensive, and you don't have to do a whole lot to them. Fast forward, or let's go backwards about, to about 1955. I got an old 800 Ford, that's a 1955 model. It's got a 172 cubic inch, 4-cylinder overhead valve engine in it. I'm doing a little bit of maintenance on it, and I was going to go ahead and check the oil bath. Now, y'all know that, our new tractors, we have our regular oil filters, then we have like the hydrostatic transmission oil filter and things like that. And then we've got, of course, the air filter for the engine air. Some of you might not know, not having been around old tractors, most of my stuff's in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I consider those to be reasonably old. They're not really old tractors because old tractors are in the 20s and the teens, and of course, in steam engines, stuff like that, which I don't deal with. Those tractors that I'm talking about have what's called an oil bath. Instead of sucking air and all the dust and debris that's generated out on the farm when you're row cropping, when you're plowing, disking, raking hay, baling hay, and all that kind of stuff, you're sucking a phenomenal amount of dust in that intake. Well, if you don't have a way to filter that air out, and that's the reason why we have air filters on our incoming air, is to keep all that debris from coming into the engine, creating wear, along with the friction of the pistons and all the rotating parts going up and down and round and round. Okay, so those old timers figured out the best way to do that, instead of having a cartridge filter, which was unheard of at the time, was to pass that air through what is called an oil bath. Okay, well, our air filters have a container on the bottom of them that's held on with a thumb nut. There's supposed to be a certain level of oil, and when the air comes in, it passes through the oil, and it sucks the air right through the oil and right out and into the intake of the carburetor, and the oil catches all the dust. Pretty doggone ingenious, ain't it? So what you'd have to do every so often, you got to pull these things off, and then down here at the bottom, sometimes in heavy dusty situations, you'll have 1/4 of an inch of just nasty black sludge right in the bottom of your oil bath. I'm just doing routine maintenance on this old 800 Ford, and I thought, well, about time for me to scrub out the bottom of this thing, put some fresh oil in it. Lo and behold, I pull this thing off, and I can see daylight right through the bottom. Now, if I was to stick this up there and show you, you can see daylight right through a series of holes right here that for whatever reason this thing has rusted through. I don't know. So we're going to make an attempt at making a repair on that. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. I don't restore tractors for prettiness. I make them functional because we use them, and we use them a lot. So at any rate, we're going to see if we can make a repair on this. And there's my shop dog, Layla. Come on, girl. Come on, girl. Come on, Layla. Come. Now, I don't mean to suggest to you that it's going to work perfectly the first time. It may not work at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my $2.50 B acetylene tank, complete with regulator and press light self-igniting torch, and I'm going to use a 95.5 soft solder and just some regular paste flux. Now, first and foremost thing you got to do is you got to get all that scum out from the inside. Then you got to buff this to perfectly shiny metal, and then we're just going to go ahead and apply some of this paste flux to it. I can probably use a white paste flux and 45% silver, but this thing is rusted and pitted so badly, a tremendous amount of heat, it's just going to fall apart. And it may happen with this too, because it is rusted pretty badly. And my stuff sets around, and it gets pretty nasty and everything. So if you're using old solder, you want to keep the impurities out of your joint. So you got to take sandpaper and shine up that whole chunk of solder that you think you're going to use, because you don't want to add those impurities to your joint. You can tell here how nasty and dingy it is, and you can tell here how nice and shiny it is once we clean that off of there. I'm going to do a nice soft flame. The press-light torch, by the way, is made to run wide open. It is to its detriment to funnel it down like I'm doing right here. I really shouldn't do that. But, got to do what you got to do. Not clean enough. Let's go with a second attempt. Now you saw that first attempt. I tried to do it. I had just buffed it. I didn't file it. I went ahead. It did not stick because it wasn't clean enough. And if you're like me, if you're a Catholic boy, you grew up in the Catholic Church, parochial schools, and them old nuns out there, you know, they always tried to get us boys with our nasty, dirty old hands. They always tried to get us to wash our hands and everything, you know. And so they always taught us that cleanliness is next to godliness. Well, I think that those old nuns might have had something going there, because I went ahead and filed that off with a file and got more down into the parent metal and got a lot of the grease and the oil out of the rusty surface of the oil bath container. Of course, you saw a very light and very gentle flame, and by golly, once I got it good and clean with the file, it stuck just as good as could be. Now the big test is going to be whenever I fill it full of oil and take a look, see if I can see any daylight through it. But if ain't no oil drips out, this is going to be good to go until I can find a replacement. But actually, I'm kind of quite proud of that, and it's still a little bit on the warm side. Got a little bit of a tiny blob on the inside of the hole, but with a hole that was 3/16 of an inch in diameter, and then a couple of small pits around it, I'm okay with a bit of a blob inside. Yeah, like I said, you know, it ain't too pretty, but what can I say? Neither am I. You know, I think I'm going to put this back on there, clean this the rest of the way, you know, nice and good in the parts washer. Put some fresh, probably 30 weight non-detergent oil, and go ahead and put this guy back on, and it's ready to go. But like I said, it's amazing the things that you can come up with. I've soldered everything under the sun, anything you can imagine, you know, from stainless steel to lead, you know, to sheet metal and just virtually anything like that. This was a quick, simple little repair, but I just thought it'd be something that might be interesting to y'all. You're only limited by your own creativity, I guess, for lack of a better term. So you know what? We have beat this to death in this Trackman 44. I am out of here. Oh, it turned out to be, I was so not out of here. A Canadian buddy of mine up in Central Ontario, his name is GP. I think his name's Gordon. GP from GP Outdoors. Just did a video just last week before last or so, and it was on servicing his Kubota. He's got a beautiful little B2601 Kubota. And he was servicing the air filter, and he did something I had never seen anybody do and didn't know that it was able to be done. He took the air filter out, and it's a cartridge filter, and he had a bucket of warm soapy water. He just washed the fire out of it, you know. Said that it's actually recommended. I didn't know that. I'd never read a Kubota manual or anything, and I told him in the comments that I'd never heard of such thing, never knew that you could do that, didn't realize that. Well, you know what? I'm apologizing officially to GP from GP Outdoors, because I lied to him. Never even dawned on me. I've been washing air filters out since I was a kid. The only difference is we use gasoline to wash these out to get all that cruddy oil and all that stuff out of there, all that sediment, and then flush them, you know, with some kerosene or diesel fuel, a little bit of fresh oil, flush them, and then put the fresh oil in, put them on the tractor. So I've been doing this since I was probably less than 10 years old, I bet you, whenever I washed my first air filter. So I totally apologize to GP Outdoors for actually lying to him in the comments. I hope he forgives me. You know, here lately, just about every attempt I have at making every attempt that I make at making a nice, short, sweet video, just showing a simple repair, I'm thwarted in some fashion. There's always something else that seems to break down or go wrong. So today ain't no exception. Now, just a few minutes ago, you saw me making that soldering up that rust hole, pretty large rust holes in this oil container on that oil bath air filter. So I thought, well, you know, I'll go ahead and clean it all up the rest of the way, you know, get it all nice and shiny. Maybe put some, maybe put a coat of primer or something on, or heaven forbid, a little bit of red paint. Just make it look a little nicer, you know. Boy, I tell you what, just proved that rust holds in a lot of the problems. So when you clear the rust away, then some of the problems actually surface. So let's take a look here. I'll show you what I mean. Right here is the place I just used the torch and the 95.5 and the flux to solder up that series of holes there. But let's look a little bit closer. As I went about the business of cleaning everything up, I exposed a couple of more holes over here. Those one of them is a little less than an eighth. One of them is a little more than an eighth. Here's another pinned hole right here around the corner or around the edge, and yet three more of them over here, and another one right here below where I stopped the repair right there, another one right there. And then here's a really big one that I had seen, but I'd forgotten to clean up and solder, so I was going to have to do that one anyway. So at any rate, let me show you how I prepared that so nicely. Now what I did over here is I just used a file and filed the rust surface off to where I got it good and shiny. But when I started cleaning this up, I thought there's a much easier, much faster way. So let me show you what I've been doing here. Got the air compressor fired up. Just use this little guy right here. It's a little cheap thing from like Northern Hydraulics or whatever. But just... with these abrasive pads, you can see right here, they're just a twist lock abrasive pad. And that's what I'm doing to get down to the bare metal. I'm going to go ahead and prep the rest of these holes, and then we're going to go about the business of fixing those too. And I tell you what, on a kind of an interesting note, we're going to use an entirely different technique this time. What we're going to use an alternative source of heat. We're going to use an actual electrical soldering iron. Now that we've got the steel all bared and the flux applied, we can get a liberal amount of solder over the opening, and we'll come back and buff that down. You can see this is a little more controlled than that torch. The torch was just a little on the difficult side. I'm going to go for this great big one right here. This great big one's going to be a little bit tougher, I think. I didn't get this quite as clean. I'm going to reposition this to allow gravity to help me puddle that solder into place. I'm going to put a little blob over here to show you what I mean. See how that's a nasty blob right there. And hopefully if I can stay in the picture. What's happening too, there's so much oil impregnated into this rusty steel that I'm actually burning that oil out of there. Do not be concerned about how nasty it is. Soft solder is very easy to clean up and make it look a little nicer. So that should be adequate right here. Old Sneelock asked me one time if I would do a video with my old blow torches. This would have been an absolute perfect opportunity to use the blow torches, but it's too cold outside, and I don't like using the blow torches inside my shop because there's too much stuff to catch on fire. These are about a 1/16 inch openings right here. Essentially what I'm doing is blobbing that solder around the opening to kind of tin the area around the hole. Then come back and attach the solder to the tinned area. After you flux your area, especially make sure you get a little flux on your solder also. Now you're really supposed to heat your material and touch your solder to the heated material and let your project melt the solder. That's in a utopian world. I'm going to clean that up. Though this is not worn out completely, there's a lot of good left in it. I'm kind of getting it filled up with some of that solder. So I just pop that off of there. It's just a twist lock. Just a twist lock. And we'll start off with a new abrasive pad to kind of work that down and save this for a piece of steel. See what about 15 seconds with a new abrasive pad will do. So that's actually going to turn out fairly nice. I got to get all this solder scum out of here. Not a big deal. That will not stick at all. So there's no reason for you to watch me grind all this down. So I'll be back after I get this cleaned up. About 20 minutes from the time we started, those holes are plugged up, buffed down, looking good. These holes here, those holes there. There's the big 1/2 inch wide gouge up here. These holes over here are taken care of, as well as a tiny one right there. I think we made it all the way around. So at any rate, is it absolutely perfect? No. Am I a body man? I am absolutely not a body man. Is this the right way to do it? Well, you know what? If you're lucky enough to reach the pearly gates, you can ask them up there if it's the right way to do it, because I flat don't know, except for my rule of thumb is, if it works, by golly, it was the right way to do it. I don't know what kind of iron I'm using. Usually your identification is around the perimeter on this right here. This is 110 volt, of course, General Electric 95 watt soldering iron with a replaceable tip. These can burn out, and you can replace those with different tips, and you can shape them. You can file them and shape them to whatever size or configuration shape that you want those to be. But this one here actually has Bell Telephone embossed in it. So this was actually manufactured specifically by General Electric for Bell Telephone. They probably made thousands of them for people across the nation. And it has a very awesome custom 20 or 25 foot cord. There's my shop dog Layla sitting down there. I don't let her run around in here. There's too many sharp pieces of metal to cut her feet on. So I leave her kind of tied up to something while I got her in here. But like I said in the video yesterday, we pretty much beat this one to death, this TrackMan 44, and I should be out of here. But one more little thing. You just never know when you work on these old tractors how quick, you know, you're going to get something repaired, how quick you're going to get done, because there's always something else rears its ugly head. You know, but it's always somewhat of a challenge. It's always fun. You just can't get all worked up about it or anything. And I don't go all crazy about doing everything exactly the way it came out of the factory. I don't care about it. If I restore one in the future, you know, for to be a trailer queen, I'm going to do it pretty doggone nice, I hope. But I don't care about that, because right now I'm still of an age where I'm using these tractors every single day, and it's much more important to me to get these mechanically back together and on the road, in the woods, in the log pile, wherever it is that I'm using those tractors, instead of having one that'll be pretty sitting on a trailer and driving around. Now, don't get me wrong, those things are absolutely wonderful and beautiful tractors. One of these days I may very well have one, but right now I just don't have the time to dedicate to it. So I make repairs like this right here, very practical repairs. There's so many people that don't really realize how simple a lot of these repairs are. And had this not been so nasty, rusty, and pitted, I wouldn't have had all those other ones show up whenever I cleaned it up after I made the first repair, and we'd have been done with this project a long time ago. But as it was, there's several more showed up, and ain't nothing gonna say that by the time I get this project done, that I won't have to fix at least one or two more, you know, because they'll probably show up. But now's the time to find it, when you're working on it, you know. But at any rate, I've said it twice. Now this is the third time. I am done with this one, this TrackMan 44. I am out of here.